My name is Anne, and at 62 years old, I thought I understood what family meant. Just last month during Thanksgiving, our dining room was filled with laughter as my son Marcus carved the turkey while his wife Stephanie arranged the perfect Instagram-worthy table setting. My grandchildren Emma and Jake ran around the house, their giggles echoing through every corner. I remember standing in the kitchen, watching through the doorway as 4 generations of our family gathered around that old oak table my late husband George and I had bought 35 years ago. Everything felt perfect, exactly how the holidays should be. But sometimes the people closest to you can surprise you in ways you never imagined. Before I share what happened next, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories. You won't believe how this Christmas story unfolds. Let me paint you a picture of who I was before this all happened, because understanding my past makes what comes next even more heartbreaking. 5 years ago, I lost my husband George to a sudden heart attack. He was only 59, and we had so many plans for retirement that never came to fruition. For 35 years, I had taught 3rd grade at Springfield Elementary, watching thousands of children learn to read, write, and discover the world around them. Those little faces kept me going during the darkest days after George's passing. Marcus, my only child, has always been the center of my universe. After his father died, it was just the 2 of us against the world. I worked extra hours tutoring students after school to save money for his college education. I wanted him to have every opportunity I never had. When he graduated with his engineering degree and landed that job at the tech company downtown, I felt like all those years of sacrifice had been worth it. He was successful, kind, and everything a mother could want in a son. My little house on Maple Street became our sanctuary. Every room holds memories of Marcus growing up. His height marks are still penciled on the kitchen doorframe, and his old bedroom remains exactly as he left it when he moved out for college. I spent countless hours over the years decorating for every holiday, especially Christmas. The living room would transform into a winter wonderland, with twinkling lights, garland draped over every surface, and presents wrapped in gold and red paper, stacked beneath our artificial tree. When Marcus introduced me to Stephanie 3 years ago, I was overjoyed. She was beautiful, intelligent, and had this confident way of speaking that made everyone pay attention when she entered a room. As a marketing manager at a growing company, she was clearly ambitious and driven. I remember thinking how perfect they looked together, like they had stepped out of a magazine spread about successful young couples. From the very beginning, I made every effort to welcome Stephanie into our family. I invited her to our weekly Sunday dinners, taught her how to make George's favorite pot roast, and even offered to help plan their wedding. During their engagement, I spent hours listening to her ideas about flowers, venues, and guest lists. I wanted her to know that I would never be one of those interfering mothers-in-law you hear about in jokes. After they married and moved into their beautiful suburban home with the wraparound porch and perfectly manicured lawn, I was careful to respect their space. I called before visiting, always brought gifts for the house, and made sure to praise Stephanie's decorating choices and cooking attempts. When Emma was born 2 years ago, followed by little Jake last year, I thought our family was complete and perfect. But looking back now, I can see the signs I chose to ignore. Stephanie was always polite to me, but there was this invisible wall she kept up. When I would share stories about Marcus as a child, she would smile tightly and change the subject. During family photos, she would position herself in ways that subtly excluded me from the main grouping. At birthday parties and holidays, I often found myself on the periphery of conversations, watching my son and daughter-in-law interact with her family and friends, while I stood alone holding my purse. I told myself I was being oversensitive. After losing George, I had become more aware of feeling left out or forgotten. Surely Stephanie was just adjusting to having a mother-in-law, and I needed to give her time and space to warm up to me. I convinced myself that love and patience would eventually win her over, that one day we would have the close relationship I had always dreamed of having with my son's wife. The first real warning signs started appearing around Halloween this year, though I didn't recognize them as such at the time. Marcus had called to invite me to go trick-or-treating with Emma and Jake through their neighborhood. I was thrilled because it would be my first Halloween with both grandchildren old enough to really enjoy the experience. I spent the entire week before finding the perfect grandmother costume and buying extra candy to hand out when we returned to their house. When I arrived at their front door at 5 o'clock sharp, carrying homemade caramel apples I had spent hours preparing, I immediately noticed something was different. Through the front window, I could see additional cars in their driveway that I didn't recognize. As Stephanie opened the door, she had this surprised expression on her face, as if she had forgotten I was coming, even though we had confirmed the plans just the day before. "Oh, Anne," she said with an overly bright smile. Come in, come in. I hope you don't mind, but my parents drove up this afternoon as a surprise. They wanted to spend Halloween with the kids, too." Behind her, I could see an older couple sitting comfortably on the living room couch, already dressed in matching costume accessories and looking completely at home. For the next 2 hours, I watched as Stephanie's parents led the trick-or-treating expedition, while I trailed behind like an afterthought. They knew exactly which houses gave out the best candy, had already established a rapport with Emma and Jake, and seemed to have inside jokes that made the children giggle constantly. When we returned to the house, the kids ran straight to their other grandparents to show off their Halloween haul, while I stood in the foyer still holding those caramel apples that no one had even acknowledged. Thanksgiving brought an even clearer picture of my changing role in the family dynamic, though I was still too hopeful to see it clearly. 3 days before the holiday, Stephanie called with a request that initially made me feel needed and appreciated. "Anne, would you mind coming over early on Thanksgiving morning to help with the cooking? I want everything to be absolutely perfect this year, and you have so much more experience in the kitchen than I do." I arrived at 7 in the morning, my arms loaded with cooking supplies and homemade cranberry sauce. What I discovered was that helping with the cooking actually meant doing almost all of the cooking while Stephanie focused on creating the perfect aesthetic for her social media posts. For the next 6 hours, I prepared the 20-pound turkey, made stuffing from scratch, mashed 15 pounds of potatoes, and prepared green bean casserole for 12 people. Meanwhile, Stephanie spent the morning arranging and rearranging the dining room table setting, taking dozens of photos of the autumn centerpiece she had ordered online, and posting Instagram stories about Thanksgiving prep with the family. When her parents and sister arrived with store-bought side dishes and a pie from the local bakery, they were greeted with hugs and champagne, while I continued working in the kitchen, my hands covered in flour and turkey grease. The dinner itself was lovely, filled with conversation and laughter, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been more hired help than family member. After the meal, while everyone else moved to the living room to watch football and play with the children, I found myself alone in the kitchen again, washing dishes and storing leftovers. When I finally joined the family in the living room an hour later, Stephanie looked up from her phone and said, "Oh, Anne, you didn't have to do all that cleaning. We could have handled it later." But she made no move to help or insist that I stop working. The pattern became even clearer in early December when Stephanie called me on a Tuesday evening. Her voice had this sweet, almost syrupy quality that I had never heard before, and she started the conversation by asking about my health and complimenting the scarf I had worn to Jake's preschool play the previous week. After several minutes of unusual pleasantries, she finally got to the point of her call. "Anne, I have a huge favor to ask you," she said, and I could practically hear her smile through the phone. "Christmas is going to be extra special this year, and I want to make sure we have the most amazing dessert spread possible. Would you be willing to handle all the desserts for our Christmas dinner? I know how much you love baking, and honestly, no one makes apple pie like you do." My heart swelled with happiness. Finally, Stephanie was asking for my help with something important, recognizing my skills and wanting me to contribute to their family celebration. "Of course, sweetheart," I replied immediately. "I would love to do that. What did you have in mind?" The list she rattled off was extensive. 2 apple pies, 1 pumpkin pie, 3 dozen Christmas cookies in different varieties, chocolate fudge, and peppermint bark. The cost of ingredients alone would be close to $200, and the time investment would require at least 3 full days of baking. But I agreed enthusiastically, already mentally planning my baking schedule and imagining Emma and Jake's faces when they saw all their favorite treats arranged on the dessert table. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen making detailed shopping lists and feeling more included in the family Christmas celebration than I had in years. Finally, I thought Stephanie was beginning to see me as a valuable part of their holiday traditions, rather than an obligation to endure. December 20th started like any other winter morning. I had been up since 5 o'clock working on the apple pies that would be the centerpiece of Christmas dessert table. The kitchen was filled with the warm scent of cinnamon and nutmeg as I rolled out the lattice tops for the second pie. My hands were covered in flour, and I was humming along to Christmas carols playing softly on the radio when the phone rang at exactly 9:15. I almost didn't answer it, thinking it might be a telemarketer, but when I saw Stephanie's name on the caller ID, I quickly wiped my hands on my apron and picked up the receiver. "Good morning, sweetheart," I said cheerfully, expecting her to ask about my progress on the desserts, or perhaps invite me to come see how the children were decorating their Christmas tree. But the voice that came through the phone was completely different from the sweet requesting tone she had used just 2 weeks earlier. This Stephanie sounded businesslike, almost cold, as if she were calling to cancel a service appointment rather than speaking to her mother-in-law about Christmas dinner. "Anne, I need to talk to you about Christmas dinner," she said without any greeting or pleasantries. "We've had a change in plans that affects the guest list, and I wanted to let you know as soon as possible so you could make other arrangements." The words hit me like a physical blow. Make other arrangements. For Christmas dinner with my own family, I set down the rolling pin and gripped the edge of the kitchen counter trying to process what I was hearing. "My parents have decided to drive up from Atlanta and spend Christmas week with us," Stephanie continued in that same detached tone. "They'll be staying in our guest room for 4 days, and frankly, we simply don't have enough space at the table for everyone. I'm sure you understand that we need to prioritize immediate family during the holidays." The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. I stared at the apple pies cooling on my counter at the grocery list for the remaining desserts stuck to my refrigerator at the Christmas cards from Marcus and the children displayed on my windowsill. Immediate family. As if I, the woman who had given birth to her husband and spent 34 years raising him, somehow didn't qualify for that designation. "Stephanie," I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper, "I don't understand. Are you saying I'm not invited to Christmas dinner?" "I'm saying we need to keep this year's celebration small and intimate," she replied, and I could hear the slight irritation in her voice, as if my confusion was unreasonable. "My parents haven't seen the children since last Christmas, and we want to give them quality time with their grandchildren. I'm sure when you were raising Marcus, you would have wanted the same consideration." I tried to argue to explain that I only needed one chair that I could help serve the meal and then leave early if space was really an issue. I suggested coming for dessert only, or perhaps stopping by earlier in the day just to exchange gifts with Emma and Jake. But Stephanie had an answer for every proposal each one delivered in that same calm, reasonable tone that made me feel like I was being selfish for even asking. "It would be awkward for everyone involved," she said when I suggested the dessert option. "The children get so excited when you're here, and then it's difficult to settle them down for their bedtime routine. And honestly, Anne, I think it's time you started developing your own Christmas traditions, instead of always depending on us to include you in ours." When I hung up the phone, I stood in my kitchen for what felt like hours, staring at those apple pies and trying to comprehend what had just happened. The woman who had asked me to provide all the desserts for their Christmas celebration had just uninvited me from the very meal where those desserts would be served. The woman who had married my son was telling me to develop my own Christmas traditions, as if spending holidays with my only child and grandchildren was some kind of imposition, rather than the natural order of families. I thought about calling Marcus immediately, but something held me back. Part of me was afraid of what I might discover about his role in this decision. Part of me hoped this was all some terrible misunderstanding that would resolve itself if I just waited a few hours. And part of me, the part that had spent the last 3 years trying so hard not to be an interfering mother-in-law, worried that calling my son to complain about his wife would only make everything worse. Instead, I turned off the oven, covered the apple pies with clean kitchen towels, and sat down at my kitchen table to cry for the first time since George's funeral. I spent December 21st in a strange state of numbness, going through the motions of my normal routine, while my mind replayed Stephanie's words over and over again. But nothing could have prepared me for what arrived in my email inbox at 7 o'clock the next morning. The subject line read, "Christmas catering costs. Please review," and the sender was Stephanie's professional email address, the one she used for work communications. Something about receiving this message on her business email made it feel even more coldly transactional, as if I were a vendor rather than family. When I opened the attachment, I discovered a detailed invoice formatted like something you might receive from a professional catering company. Every item was listed with precise costs: organic free-range turkey, $75, honey-glazed ham, $67, premium wine selection, $156, specialty appetizers, $98, Christmas decorations and centerpieces, $134. The list went on for 2 full pages, including items like professional table linens and seasonal floral arrangements. At the bottom of the invoice, in bold letters, was the total cost, $847. Below that, an itemized breakdown showing my portion as exactly half, $423.50. The final line of the email read, "Please transfer your portion via Venmo or bank transfer by December 23rd to ensure all arrangements are confirmed. Thank you for your understanding and cooperation." I read the email 3 times before the full impact hit me. Stephanie had uninvited me from Christmas dinner, told me there was no room at the table for me, suggested I develop my own holiday traditions, and then sent me a bill for nearly half the cost of the celebration I was banned from attending. She expected me to pay for the privilege of being excluded from my own family's Christmas. The mathematical precision of splitting the bill exactly in half felt particularly cruel. She hadn't even pretended that the cost should be divided among all the adults attending or calculated based on the number of people each family was contributing. She had simply decided that I, despite being unwelcome at the table, should pay for half of everything. I immediately called Marcus, my hands shaking as I dialed his number. When he answered, I could hear the children playing in the background and the sound of morning television, all the peaceful domestic sounds of a family preparing for a regular day. The contrast between their normal happiness and my devastation made everything feel even more surreal. "Marcus, honey, I need to talk to you about Christmas." I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just received an email from Stephanie about paying for dinner, but she told me yesterday that I'm not invited. I'm really confused about what's happening here." There was a long pause before he responded, and when he did speak, his voice had that careful, measured tone people use when they're trying to avoid a difficult conversation. "Mom Stephanie handles all the party planning and social arrangements for our family. She's really good at organizing these things, and I trust her judgment about what works best for our house and our situation." "But Marcus," I said, "I'm your mother. Don't you think there should be room for me at your Christmas table? And if there really isn't room, why would I be expected to pay for a dinner I can't attend? Maybe it's time you started thinking about creating your own holiday traditions," he said, almost word for word, echoing what Stephanie had told me. "You're a grown woman with your own house and your own life. You don't need to depend on us to make your holidays meaningful." The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, but it became increasingly clear that Marcus had already decided to support his wife's decision completely. When I tried to explain how hurtful and illogical the whole situation was, he kept redirecting the conversation back to Stephanie's organizational skills and the complexity of hosting family gatherings. When I mentioned the financial aspect, he said that shared costs were normal for family celebrations and that I should appreciate being included in the planning process. After we hung up, I sat in my living room looking at the Christmas tree I had decorated with ornaments collected over 34 years of celebrating holidays with my son. Under that tree were carefully wrapped presents for Emma and Jake, gifts I had spent weeks selecting and purchasing with my teacher's pension money. In the corner of the room sat a large bag filled with homemade stockings I had sewn for each family member, including one for Stephanie that featured her favorite colors and a small embroidered initial. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something other than sadness and confusion. I felt angry, not just disappointed or hurt, but genuinely furious at the calculating cruelty of what they were doing to me. They wanted my money, but not my presents. They wanted me to contribute to their perfect Christmas celebration while sitting alone in my own house. They wanted to erase me from the family gathering while still treating me like a financial resource to be tapped when convenient. The next morning, I was still sitting in my kitchen in my bathrobe at 9 o'clock when my neighbor Dorothy knocked on the back door. Dorothy had lived next to us for 15 years and had become one of my closest friends after George died. She was the kind of person who noticed when you didn't bring in your newspaper or when your kitchen light stayed on too late, and she had an uncanny ability to show up exactly when you needed someone to talk to. "Anne, honey, you look terrible," she said the moment I opened the door. "What's going on? You haven't been outside for 2 days, and I can see you've been crying." I invited her in and made coffee while I told her the entire story from the Halloween incident through the Thanksgiving kitchen duty to the Christmas uninvitation and the catering bill. Dorothy listened without interruption, her expression growing more outraged with each detail I shared. When I finished talking, Dorothy was quiet for a long moment, stirring her coffee with more force than necessary. Finally, she looked up at me with fire in her eyes. "And that girl is treating you like hired help. Actually worse than hired help, because at least hired help gets paid instead of having to pay for the privilege of working." She pulled out her phone and started scrolling through social media. "I've been following Stephanie on Instagram because I like seeing pictures of the children," she said, "and you need to see what she's been posting about Christmas." She turned the screen toward me, and I saw a series of photos showing elaborate Christmas preparations, professional-looking table settings, designer Christmas decorations, and multiple shots of expensive-looking food arrangements. The captions told the story of a woman who was planning an exclusive high-end Christmas celebration. "Creating magical memories with our intimate family gathering," read one post. "So blessed to have this special time with just our closest loved ones," said another. The hashtags included things like #new holiday traditions, #intimate family Christmas, and #quality over quantity. "Look at the comments," Dorothy said, scrolling down. Her friends are all praising her for keeping Christmas drama-free and prioritizing what really matters. She's been presenting this whole thing like some kind of lifestyle choice instead of what it really is, cutting out your husband's mother. I stared at those posts for several minutes, seeing my exclusion from a completely different perspective. This wasn't a spontaneous decision based on limited seating or her parents' surprise visit. This was a calculated campaign to establish new family dynamics with me permanently positioned as an outsider. The elaborate planning, the professional-level presentation, the carefully crafted social media narrative, all of it had been designed to create her perfect vision of Christmas, and that vision simply didn't include me. "She's been planning this for weeks, maybe months," I said slowly, the full scope of the manipulation becoming clear. "The catering costs, the guest list, the whole intimate family concept. She never intended to include me. She just wanted to make sure I was still available to pay for part of it." Dorothy nodded grimly. "And your son is letting her do it. Actually, he's actively supporting her. Did you notice how he used almost the exact same words she did when he talked to you yesterday?" That observation hit me like a physical blow because it was absolutely true. Marcus hadn't just passively gone along with his wife's decision. He had actively participated in delivering the message designed to make me feel guilty for even expecting to be included in my own family's Christmas celebration. I excused myself and went to my bedroom, where I sat on the edge of the bed and truly absorbed what was happening to me. My son and his wife had not just excluded me from Christmas, they had collaborated to make me feel unreasonable for expecting inclusion while simultaneously demanding that I financially contribute to my own exclusion. They had turned my love for my family into a weapon to manipulate and exploit me. For the first time in 3 years of trying to be the perfect, non-interfering mother-in-law, I realized that my careful respect for their marriage and my desperate desire to maintain family harmony had created a situation where I was being treated with less consideration than they would show to casual acquaintances. I walked back to the kitchen where Dorothy was waiting and said the words that would change everything. "I'm not paying for that dinner, and I'm not spending Christmas alone feeling sorry for myself either. If they want an intimate family Christmas without me, then that's exactly what they're going to get." The next 24 hours were a whirlwind of activity as I put together what Dorothy later called the perfect response to their perfect Christmas. My first step was calling my sister Linda in Tampa, something I probably should have done days earlier instead of wallowing in self-pity. Linda listened to my story with the kind of outrage that only a sister can provide. "Anne, get on a plane right now," she said before I had even finished explaining everything. "Bob and I have been hoping you'd come visit for Christmas anyway. The kids are bringing the grandchildren down from Atlanta, and we're having the whole extended family gathering. There will be 22 people here, and we'd love to have you make it 23. The contrast between Linda's immediate enthusiastic invitation and my own son's calculated exclusion was so stark, it almost made me laugh. Here was a woman offering to include me in a gathering that was already quite large, while my daughter-in-law claimed she couldn't find room for me at a dinner for 8 people. I booked a flight to Tampa for Christmas Eve morning, but not before crafting the most carefully worded email of my entire life. I spent hours writing and rewriting my response to Stephanie's catering invoice, making sure every word was perfect. "Dear Stephanie," I began, "thank you for the detailed breakdown of Christmas dinner costs. I appreciate you taking the time to itemize everything so precisely. However, after careful consideration, I must respectfully decline to contribute financially to a celebration from which I have been excluded. Since you've made it clear that there is no seat for me at your Christmas table, it would be inappropriate for me to pay for food. I will not eat decorations, I will not see, and festivities, I will not attend. I'm sure you understand that contributing to the cost of my own exclusion would set a concerning precedent for future family gatherings. I hope you and your immediate family have the intimate Christmas celebration you're planning. Best regards, Anne." Before I could lose my nerve, I hit send and copied Marcus on the email. Then I turned off my phone and spent the rest of the day packing for Florida and wrapping the Christmas gifts I had bought for Emma and Jake. I would leave those presents on their front porch Christmas morning with a note explaining that Grandma was spending the holidays with people who wanted her company. Christmas Eve morning, I was at the airport by 6 a.m. checking in for my flight to Tampa. As I sat at the gate waiting to board, I turned my phone back on for the first time in 18 hours. The screen immediately flooded with notifications, 12 missed calls from Marcus, 4 voicemails from Stephanie, and multiple text messages from both of them. The voicemails were a fascinating study in panic and attempted damage control. Marcus's first message was defensive. "Mom, I can't believe you sent that email. Stephanie is really upset, and this isn't how families should handle disagreements." By his third message, his tone had shifted to concern. "Mom, where are you? Stephanie tried to call to work things out, but your phone goes straight to voicemail. Call me back so we can fix this." Stephanie's messages were even more revealing. Her first voicemail started with indignation. "Anne, your email was completely uncalled for and frankly quite rude. I was trying to include you in the celebration by having you contribute to the costs, and this is how you respond." But her second message showed cracks in the confident facade. "Anne, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Can you call me back so we can discuss this like adults?" I listened to all the messages while boarding the plane, and then I composed one final text before turning my phone to airplane mode. "Having a wonderful Christmas with family who actually want me here. Hope your intimate celebration is everything you planned." Christmas morning in Linda's house was a revelation. I woke up to the sound of children laughing downstairs, the smell of coffee and cinnamon rolls, and the kind of warm, chaotic energy that comes from having multiple generations gathered under one roof for the sole purpose of enjoying each other's company. Linda's Christmas gathering was everything a family celebration should be. The dining room table had been extended with card tables to accommodate everyone, and place settings were mismatched but cheerful. Children ran between the kitchen and living room, while adults collaborated on meal preparation, and no one was excluded from conversations or relegated to servant status. When Linda's daughter-in-law, Jennifer, found out I had been uninvited from my own family's Christmas, her reaction was immediate and fierce. "Are you kidding me? If my mother-in-law wanted to come for Christmas, I'd make room for her if I had to set up a TV tray in the hallway." The other family members were equally shocked and supportive, treating me like a refugee from holiday cruelty who needed extra care and attention. Around 10 o'clock, while everyone was still in pajamas opening presents in the living room, I posted a photo on Facebook showing myself surrounded by Linda's family, all of us wearing matching Christmas morning smiles. My caption read, "Spending Christmas with people who actually want me at their table. Sometimes the best family traditions are the new ones you create when you finally realize your worth." Within minutes, the post had received dozens of likes and comments from friends, former colleagues, and extended family members. Many of the responses expressed shock that I wasn't spending Christmas with Marcus and the children, forcing me to explain in subsequent comments that I had been uninvited from their celebration. The public nature of these explanations was not something I had planned, but it felt liberating to stop hiding the truth about what had been done to me. My phone, which I had been ignoring most of the morning, started buzzing constantly around 11 a.m. The missed call notifications showed Marcus had tried to reach me 8 times, and there were multiple text messages from both him and Stephanie. But I was having too much fun playing board games with Linda's grandchildren and helping prepare a genuine family feast to deal with their panic. Finally, around 2 in the afternoon, Stephanie called while I was sitting on Linda's back porch, watching the grandchildren play in the unusually warm Florida sunshine. This time I answered. "Anne, where are you?" she demanded, her voice high-pitched and stressed. "The children have been asking for you all morning, and Marcus is worried sick. This whole thing has gotten completely out of hand." "I'm exactly where I told you I would be," I replied calmly. "I'm spending Christmas with family who actually invited me to their table." "But you can't just disappear on Christmas," Stephanie said, and I could hear the genuine confusion in her voice. "The children expect you to be here. They've been asking about your Christmas cookies and why Grandma isn't coming over." "Stephanie," I said, enjoying the irony of having to explain this to her, "you told me there was no room for me at your Christmas table. You specifically said I should develop my own holiday traditions instead of depending on you to include me. That's exactly what I'm doing." The conversation that followed was a masterclass in attempted manipulation and damage control. Stephanie tried multiple approaches, claiming I had misunderstood her intentions, insisting that the space issue was temporary and could have been resolved, suggesting that my reaction was disproportionate to a simple seating problem. When those tactics failed, she moved to guilt. The children were disappointed, Marcus was hurt by my actions, and I was ruining everyone's Christmas by being stubborn. But the most revealing moment came when she said, "Anne, I never meant for you to take it this literally. Of course you're family. I just thought you'd understand that sometimes compromises need to be made for practical reasons." "Compromises," I repeated slowly, "like expecting me to pay for a dinner I can't attend." The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. She had never expected me to actually refuse to pay or to remove myself from the situation entirely. She had expected me to accept my diminished role, contribute my money, and be grateful for whatever scraps of inclusion might eventually be offered. "Stephanie," I said finally, "you've given me exactly what you said you wanted, an intimate Christmas celebration with just your immediate family. I hope it's everything you planned for." The remainder of Christmas Day with Linda's family was everything I had forgotten the holidays could be. We spent hours around the extended dining table sharing stories and memories while children wandered freely between adults' laps. No one was assigned kitchen duty based on their status in the family hierarchy, and everyone contributed something to the feast without keeping track of costs or contributions. That evening, while the children watched Christmas movies and the adults played cards, I reflected on how different this felt from recent holidays with Marcus and Stephanie. Here I was included in conversations. Naturally, my opinions were asked for and valued, and no one treated my presence as an obligation to endure rather than a gift to enjoy. Linda and I stayed up late that night talking about family dynamics and the importance of recognizing when relationships become unhealthy. "You've spent 3 years trying so hard not to be the stereotypical interfering mother-in-law that you forgot you had the right to be treated with basic respect," she observed. "Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for everyone involved is to stop accepting unacceptable treatment." Over the next few days, the calls and messages from Marcus continued, but their tone shifted significantly. By December 27th, he was no longer defending Stephanie's decisions or trying to convince me I had overreacted. Instead, he was asking if we could meet somewhere to talk when I returned home, admitting that he had maybe not handled things as well as he could have. The most significant call came on December 30th, 3 days after Christmas, when Marcus called me while Stephanie was out shopping with the children. His voice was different, tired and defeated, in a way I had never heard before. "Mom, I need to apologize," he said without any preamble. "I've been thinking about Christmas, and about how we've been treating you, and I can't defend it anymore." Stephanie's mother made some comments during dinner that made me realize how this whole situation must look to other people. Apparently, Stephanie's mother had asked several times during Christmas dinner why I wasn't there, expressing surprise that the grandmother would miss her grandchildren's Christmas. When Stephanie explained about the space limitations and the need for intimate family time, her own mother had looked confused and said, "But surely Marcus's mother takes priority over us. We're just in-laws." "I've been so focused on keeping peace in my marriage that I forgot about keeping peace with my actual family," Marcus continued. "And when I really thought about it, I realized that if someone treated Linda the way we've been treating you, you would have said something to me years ago." The conversation that followed was long overdue and painful for both of us. Marcus admitted that he had noticed the pattern of exclusion and diminishing respect, but had convinced himself it was temporary, that Stephanie just needed time to adjust to having a mother-in-law. He acknowledged that asking me to pay for a dinner I was banned from attending was completely insane, and that he should have spoken up immediately when that request was made. Most importantly, he recognized that his failure to defend me or set boundaries with his wife had damaged our relationship in ways that would require significant effort to repair. "I don't know how to fix this, Mom," he said, "but I want to try if you're willing to give me the chance." By New Year's Eve, I had made several important decisions about how I wanted to move forward. I would no longer accept invitations that came with conditions or expectations of unpaid labor. I would not pay for celebrations I was not genuinely welcome to attend. And I would not pretend that everything was fine when it clearly was not, no matter how uncomfortable that made other people. When Marcus asked if he and the children could come visit me at my house for New Year's Day without Stephanie, I agreed. It was time to start rebuilding our relationship, but it would have to be on terms that respected my dignity and worth as his mother and as a human being. The most profound change, though, was in how I viewed my own value and my right to expect decent treatment from the people who claimed to love me. At 62 years old, I had finally learned that sometimes you have to remove yourself from the table to realize you were never really invited to the feast. And once you understand that truth, you can start looking for tables where you are not just tolerated, but truly celebrated. I spent New Year's Eve volunteering at the local homeless shelter, serving dinner to people who thanked me genuinely for ladling soup into their bowls. The contrast between their heartfelt gratitude and my family's expectation that I should pay for the privilege of being ignored was not lost on me. These strangers treated me with more respect in one evening than my daughter-in-law had shown me in 3 years. As I drove home that night, I realized that this Christmas crisis had been a gift in disguise. It had forced me to see clearly what I had been accepting and to understand that my love for my son and grandchildren did not require me to accept abuse from anyone. Family relationships are supposed to be built on mutual respect and genuine affection, not financial contributions and silent tolerance of disrespect. The new year would bring new boundaries, new traditions, and a new understanding of what I would and would not accept from the people in my life. And if that made some family gatherings less convenient for other people, well, that was a compromise I was finally willing to let them make. Have you ever found yourself paying for your own exclusion from family events? What would you do if someone asked you to fund a celebration you weren't invited to attend? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about standing up for yourself and finding your worth. Don't forget to share this with anyone who might need to hear that they deserve better treatment from their own family. Sometimes we all need a reminder that our value doesn't depend on other people's approval and that the best family traditions are the ones where everyone is genuinely wanted at the table. Thank you for listening to my story. And I hope your holidays are filled with people who celebrate you, not just tolerate you.